Welcome to Cross Platform Podcast, where we discuss how to solve productivity problems across platforms. I'm Augusto Pinaud,
And I'm Art Gelwicks.
and today we're talking about connectivity, or should I say, without connectivity, and what are the issues? What has been our experience over the year? And I'm sure we are going to drop our age into this because the concept of connectivity as we understand it today was not as pretty some years ago. So let's just start talking about
Let's,
that.
yeah, I wanted us to discuss this because one, it's specifically relevant to some work that I've been dealing with recently in situations where I've had to go into physical locations that literally had no connectivity. Not so much that it couldn't be provided, but you have things like buildings blocking signals and things like that. And it raises some very interesting logistical problems. And you're right that we didn't used to have, back in the day, before all this gray in the beard, uh, we didn't have to think about whether we were going to have connectivity because connectivity was a luxury. It
Right.
was
We
great if you could
assume
be,
we did not
yeah,
have it.
yeah, it was, the premise was we were not going to be able to be connected. And if we were, great, that was wonderful, that was really cool. But otherwise, we would do what we needed to do. Well, now so many applications and so many platforms require connectivity that it really becomes difficult because if you have created these as part of your staple of solutions across all your tools, and now you can't connect, not only do you not have access to the tool, you don't have access to the information in the tool. Now, it's becoming less and less common to go into areas, you would think, let me quantify that. You would think it was becoming less and less common to go into areas that don't have connectivity, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think a lot of the perceptions that we generate come from a position of, I want to say, almost, it's not entitlement, there's a different term I want to use.
I think it's
Uh,
entitlement. I think one of the difference was, and coming back to pre gray, I agree with you. Not only that, you plan across not having connectivity. So I remember, for
right.
example, flying LA, Miami, or LA anywhere
Hmm.
when I was traveling much. And there were moments that I look, "Oh, I have so many emails to process. And I was looking at the calendar, when is the next long plane trip? Okay. That
Hmm.
I can sit in there and I know I'm going to be in this capsule and process all those. And I did a lot of those. And I remember going to vendor or going to, as a vendor to clients and knowing that most likely you will not have connectivity. The problem now is part of you is mostly connected because your
Hmm.
cell phone will receive those emails. Okay. The question is, can you reply really with the information that you need? I understand if you have enough technology knowledge, that's not a problem. But the people who have those problems, who have a laptop, and they don't know how to bridge between the laptop and the phone. And I tell the story. I was with a client. This was not that long ago. Okay, a couple of years maybe, and they wanted me to do some of the work on their laptop. So I drove to the client. We were trying to configure the thing, and this laptop, for whatever reason, was not connected to their network. So we could not download the piece to be able to connect it. And at the end of the day, I end up putting my phone out, put it as a hotspot, and that's how we fix the problem. But require that you at least have those basic tidbits of things. Okay. The solution before I pulled my phone was, okay, well, sorry, we make you here, come here. We're not going to ship it to IT. When they send us back, then you can come back and fix it because IT was not in the building. So you have all those problems. Number one. Number two, in a certain way, I think we were looking forward to those moments without connectivity. And
Okay.
now we have go, in many cases, out of the habit of having that moments of
Oh, quiet
non-connectivity.
times. Okay.
Yeah,
I see
quiet
that.
time.
I can
Okay.
see that.
Again, I look for the plane trips. And to
Hmm.
this day, there are moments that I shut this thing down. Okay. This my notification things. There are certain times that they're shut off automatically. Yes, if you're insistent, you will pass through that.
Hmm.
I get it. Okay. But it is designed so I don't have any noise. I have an iPad. When I walk out of my office and I'm not going to be working more, I work in the iPad mini, okay, that is sitting there behind me. But that device is designed, even that it's connected, it has LTE. So I technically I am connected anywhere. It is designed to be a disconnected device. That
Hmm.
device do not have an alert. Zero. All the alerts are turned off. Okay. Why? Because it's designed to work as close
Hmm.
as a device without connectivity. I don't want the ding for the email. I don't want the ding, the alerts, nothing. But
Well,
a lot of people has been getting used to the ding, and the ding, I get it. I get the adrenaline, I get the excitement, but also I get the exhaustion that produce.
and the notifications, that's one thing. And having that immediate access to information is something that we've gotten comfortable with. And you're right.
Yeah.
As an effective way of just mental stability, at times you have to turn off that fire hose. What my real concern is when we start to look at the tools we're using for things like, you said email, perfect example. Um, for the longest time, and even now, a lot of times we'll use email clients installed on the device. They connect to the email server. They will actually pull a copy of the email down. Then you have a local copy of it. You can read, review, sort, whatever. If you write a response, it sits in your outbox until it connects and can send it. That's a local application with an
Mhm.
offline mode. Something like Gmail doesn't have that. Gmail doesn't run offline the same way. It doesn't have that same experience because it's not designed that way. Now, if you have the Gmail app installed on something like iOS or Android,
Right.
you can do that. But we start to look at some of these applications that we use, and we have to really say, if I'm going to be using this and I'm someplace where I can't connect, is this going to still work? And I'll use two examples that I brought up in the pre-show. One is my favorite tool, OneNote. OneNote on Windows desktop has a wonderful offline mode. It will synchronize with the cloud. You have a full copy of your notes. You can edit, you can rearrange, and when you reconnect, it resynchronizes and publishes it out. Does a great job. Some people have an issue with the sync, but that's a whole different conversation. That
But it's
said,
mhm. Sorry.
well, I was going to say, that said, on Chromebook now, you can't do that because up until this point, the only application that would support that capability on Chromebook was the Android app for OneNote. Well, they've discontinued that app. So now you have to use the web version on a Chromebook. So if I've built my platform around having a desktop copy of OneNote and using my Chromebook now is not an option if I'm in a non-connected or unconnected environment. I don't have that capability to have that local application. So that really throws, I mean, it has honestly upset my productivity platform because I know this device is no longer an option in certain circumstances. Not through any action of my own, through the action of the software vendor who creates the tool that I'm using. And if you look at another application, OneNote, or not OneNote, Notion, for example, Notion doesn't have an offline mode at all. So if you're offline, you can't even start the conversation with the stuff in Notion. So if all your stuff is there and all your notes and everything else and your to-dos and your deadlines and your dates and all, you have to be connected. And
So,
that really can be an issue.
so you're making me think about this. because as you said, there are two first world problems in here. Okay, one is
Hmm.
I work too much in my office. Okay, two, I have data in most of my devices. So if you are not blocking data, okay,
Hmm.
or AT&T is doing what AT&T does, okay, technically I should have access to
Hmm.
everything that is local. But my question comes now to PWAs, and specifically in the world of Chromebooks and stuff, because the PWAs by design had the ability in most operating systems, for not to say in all of them, to keep at least that data cache. So
Hmm.
when you reconnect, then it should synchronize. Given that feels like going back to 2004, okay,
Yeah.
where you get some data, okay, and then you're like, come on, Windows, let me connect, don't crash, connect it to the web, and all those emails went out. Okay.
And that's the problem you get into with those. With PWAs specifically. Uh, if you go through and you do an update, for example, OneNote, running it on the Chromebook from the web as a PWA, I can use it. That's fine. But you're right. It's sitting there going, well, don't close this until we're connected so that we can update your data. That's no way to live. That's no way to operate because you never know what's going to happen. That's not offline. That's prayer. And that should not be a way to try to do work.
But
So it's, I don't understand. I understand why the move to make sure everything's cloud based. I'm a huge cloud advocate. I think that's fantastic. But I think there's some things that you just need to have a local copy of to be able to work from. And I struggle with the applications that don't provide that capability. It's becoming now certain ones. For example, again, like my accounting software, it's cloud-based. Yeah, in theory, I should probably have a local copy of that. I can back the stuff up. That's fine. But I couldn't actually do anything with the data because there is no local app. There's no app
mhm,
to install. It's all cloud-based. My graphic design application is all cloud-based. So if I have no
correct,
connectivity, I'm not doing any design
you're
work.
dead in the water, right?
So yeah, I have really kind of hung myself fully on the, hanging from a cloud. But I recognize that the bulk of that work in a situation where I'm not connected can probably wait till I am. It doesn't have that urgency. But what do you do with the stuff that is urgent? And what do you do now? Things like Android and iOS actually provide a good safety valve for that because native apps, for the most part, provide some sort of local interconnection for the data. Not always, though. And I think that's circling through this entire conversation. One of the things you have to do is how do you plan for this? Because it could happen if you're in a situation where you don't have a connection for some reason, whatever reason. How do you know what apps are going to work and what apps aren't?
Right.
And
And
the art
that's exactly where you have me thinking here.
well, and this is the easiest way to do it is you do a test for yourself. You take your devices and you put all your devices in airplane mode
Hmm.
and you see what you can work with and what you can't. What can you open? What can you get to? What complains that it doesn't have connectivity? And how do you mitigate those? And what are the critical things that you would need? This partially goes to when we talked about things like disaster planning as well. What are the critical things that you would need that you would still have to get access to even if there was no connectivity?
Hmm.
So if you think about, for example, a power outage or a significant weather event and you have no connectivity, um, but your phone's still charged, what could be on there that you could have access to? Homeowners insurance, critical, emergency contact lists, and medication information. That's the type of thing that you have to plan around and say, okay, worst case scenario, there is no connection. What do I have? What don't I have? But I would say, and this is something I've been doing, is airplane mode. Turn off the connectivity, and On a phone, it's a little bit different because you absolutely have to make sure you turn off Wi-Fi and mobile because sometimes it'll sneak in the back end. But then try and use your stuff. Make a list of the things and go through each one and say, okay, well, this will work and this won't. And you may find that there are tools that you have to say, I just can't use this one anymore. It's not going to work for me in that situation. Or have a backup, have an
or have a
alternative
backup, right?
way. Have an alternative. And this is, I admit it this way. Um, One of the things that I've done is I have a OneNote folder or a OneNote notebook that has a lot of my critical information and personal information and things like that that I need. I will periodically run an export of that as a PDF file, and then I
Mhm.
place that PDF file in a secure encrypted folder on my phone. So there's a local copy of that file on my phone in an encrypted folder that doesn't require connectivity to access. It's on the physical device. So worst case scenario, everything goes away. The only thing I have is my phone and there's no connectivity. I still have access to at least that set of information. It's not paranoia, but it's getting pretty close. But it actually has saved my bacon once or twice already. So,
Right.
and that's where we have to look at these kinds of tools. This is where I get into this struggle with tools like Notion, for example, that don't have exceptionally clean ways to pull the data. You can do it. You can do PDF exports and things like that, but it takes a lot of conscious effort, and you're building a lot of structures that don't necessarily convey themselves to being outside that tool. And that tool is a black hole at times. So,
At
so in
times.
your situation, yeah, well, yeah. So in your situation, when you look at all your iPads and everything else, if there were no connectivity in your office right now, what percentage of your devices do you think would be fairly useless?
If you took connectivity out of I if you took connectivity out of me, there is really, I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm going to capture it to make that test. If I shut down everything,
Hmm.
what I cannot access. And I don't think there is that that much. Um, for sure, I can say there is a client that I will not be able to work with because I need to connect on a
Hmm.
remote box into their environment. So if I have no
Right.
connectivity, there is no way for me to do anything. But that's not because my tools uh,
Hmm.
could work better or worse. Other than that, I think most of my devices, and it may be because of the iOS environment, they have the local copy. So I will be able to shut down the data and survive for
Hmm.
whatever long. Um, but that said, it will bring in my particular situation the issue of moving from device to device. Okay. Because I'm
Okay.
not conscious necessarily how much I move from device to device, but I
Hmm.
move because I tend to leave the screens fixed. Okay, I have 7 screens around me and they
Hmm.
tend to have fixed information, but I know they synchronize to the Wi Fi to one device. I can grab my iPad and run, and all the information, regardless the device I was working, is
Hmm.
synchronized. If you kill my connectivity, that synchronization die. Okay,
Right.
there is no synchronization. That will affect significantly, even to the point that the last on April, I took a trip, and even that I brought the devices, the place where I was, the connectivity was iffy at best. So I
Hmm.
was using data okay, to connect. But then there is two of those devices that they're old. I don't have data. I don't I did not consider before this trip that I needed data for them, but it was a problem during this trip that I needed to activate hotspots and stuff so
Hmm.
they will share the data. And before the trip, I had not considered it. So you made a very good point on, in the same way that we do backups and we test backups and we think into this recovery of the
Hmm.
information, now that the connectivity has changed from it would be nice to get to I need it, where is
Hmm.
that test on your cross platforms, on your what happened if this happened, we're traveling in this same trip, okay, coming back, and we were coming to the mountains of Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
okay, where data is bad at best, okay,
Yeah, it's sketchy.
and I did not. It was my fault. I did not thought about that, and I had a call that needed to happen during that. That at the
Hmm.
end ended up being rescheduled because my connection could not do it. Okay, and it was my bad, but it was my bad because of that. We are now into the luxury of feel that we are connected 24/7 without any
Hmm.
issues, and maybe we need to start looking into, okay, what are our plan B if this connectivity fails. I here in my office, I can recall the last time we lost internet connection. Even when I moved to this house, I remember considering getting a second service because where I used to live before,
Hmm.
that second service saved my bacon a couple of times. Okay, because the company went down and I just moved the routers, unplugged them, and I was live again.
Hmm.
In this house, I said, okay, we are going to evaluate uh, Verizon. That's what we have, Fios. And if it's iffy as it was, then, but I now that you mentioned that, I have over 2 years living in here and I cannot recall, I can't remember one day that the internet was down early in the morning. And as I drove my kids to school, there was so many Verizon Fios trucks around the area
Hmm.
that I understood it was not my house. It was a problem. And 2 hours later, we were up. And that's the only time I can recall no data
Yeah,
or
see,
no
for us,
internet.
it's every like 2 or 3 months. Comcast will manage to trip over themselves, and you wind up with a period of time where there is no data connectivity until, and they never know when it's going to come back up, but it usually
Right.
comes back up within a few hours. But I'll give a perfect example. Last night I was at a location that had public access Wi-Fi. Great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's something that a lot of people can leverage and use. It wasn't working right. You could connect to it, but you couldn't get through it to the internet. And that's one of the things where you make that assumption, oh, I'm going to have access to Wi-Fi when I go somewhere. Well, but you're also at the whim of whoever's providing that Wi-Fi service to you. It may be connected, but it may be terrible service. You may be getting
Right.
1 megabit transfer rates, so you can't do a lot of things. Um, an interesting parallel story, my wife is out of the country currently, and when she landed where she is now, immediately just about all of them purchased Wi-Fi hotspots because that's kind of a ubiquitous thing that people just do there.
Right.
They have that connectivity, and she's in South Korea right now, which was one of the countries that has the best internet connectivity in the world. And talk about ubiquitous. I mean, I don't know what they would do if they didn't have connectivity, but you're
Mm-hmm.
right. Crossing about mid-state Pennsylvania, there are big gaps in connectivity. You go
Massive.
anywhere, you get off the East Coast, you get off the West Coast, you get away from a major urban area, and you can hit dead areas very easily. I can hit dead areas just driving down the road from me. So thinking about this mechanism, and again, doing that testing exercise to determine what data you would have access to, what data you don't, and then marrying that with the what data do I need
Mm-hmm.
and what data do I not need, do those two, that X and Y axis, overlap in the right places? That to me, when we talk about cross platform, we have to take into consideration that platform is not just the devices that we have purchased. but it is the services backing up
Right.
those devices and making those devices function. So when we think about things like connectivity, who our provider is, how reliable are they? You know, do you need a secondary provider in some cases? What is your backup plan? Um, Things like 5G cellular, that has provided some interesting opportunities as hotspots because that can almost become your backup provider. You may lose home office connectivity, but you still have that hotspot. And you can jump over to that and kind of work your way through for a period of time. But I have to get people to think about this because it is so easy to get wrapped up in the latest, greatest web-based application, and to park all your stuff there and then realize, I can't get to it right now. Sorry. But
Well,
maybe that's
but
not a terrible thing. Think
no,
about when
it's
we used,
not. But it's not when
yeah,
you're aware that it can happen. When you know
yeah,
the limitations on the platform, it's not. And actually, going back to that trip, one of the things that we noticed and that I actually make note of was my wife. Our household lived in AT&T. Don't ask me why. Okay, it may be masochism, I think, but
hmm
her work phone is on Verizon. Okay, and it was interesting during this trip because depending where we were,
hmm
okay, we got into three situations. Both work fine, no issues, or AT&T didn't work, or Verizon didn't work. So we were hotspotting in many places, So we could do that. That it make a note for me that when next upgrade come, I need to look into getting one of these tablets, okay,
hmm
into their own plan, so I can tether and I can do other things, so that way I can make sure, that things are working the way they should work.
Perfect example. If you're in a situation where you think your primary cellular provider could be sketchy in some areas, which we all see, the maps don't exactly overlap. You may compel yourself to look into phones that support dual SIM cards.
Mhm.
So you can have two different providers. And that's, again, it could be a significant edge case, but there are geographic limitations to the connectivity. And
Right.
you have to be aware of that, how that impacts you. And you're right, being able to have alternative devices with alternative paths means that you have a more reliable structure. Because what we're really talking about is single points of failure.
Mhm.
And connectivity can become a single point of failure. And if that dismantles your entire platform for that period of time, you've got a couple questions to ask yourself. One, can I muddle through without the connectivity? What's the worst thing that will happen? Okay, I can't respond to an email in a timely manner. Okay,
Right.
big deal. I can live with that. Uh, Maybe, depending on what you're doing, a lot of times it's just like, okay, this is found time that I could do something else. I don't know. But in some cases, some positions, you have to have that connectivity and you can't have that single point of failure.
Right.
So you have to mitigate and plan around that. But I really encourage people to do that experiment. Flip on airplane mode. And here's the ironic thing is that if you flip on airplane mode for a period of time and you find that you can pretty much work on basic stuff, now we get back to what you were talking about, Augusto, being able to use that to declare offline time, to be able to say, maybe for Friday morning, I'm going to flip on airplane mode and only deal with local stuff, cleaning up notes, cleaning up my email and in Outlook and things like that. And that way I'm not receiving anything new and I'm not enticed to go check Google News or to go do a search for something. That's all off the radar. So it's an interesting extension or possible extension to your platform. Starting from this point of vulnerability, can it be turned into a benefit? And can you mitigate your environment in those ways? So I'd be curious, anyone who's listening to this, what your experiences are with offline connectivity and how it's impacted your process and your executions. I think that it's a very personal experience for many people,
It is.
and some decisions you wind up making based on what you're willing to live with, not with what you have to live with.
That's, but again, we bring, or you bring to me a point that I have considered this. I told you I have, as I was preparing for the show, I checked, oh, yeah, remember I could capture this and capture this, but I have not execute until this conversation, because it didn't even came or it didn't occur to me while we were preparing for the show is, can I do that test right now? Can I shut down all
Hmm.
connectivities and what will happen? And I think in the same way we do the test for the backups. Hey, I back up
Yeah.
my pictures, but I want to check that I can download them back from, wherever you have them. What is your plan if your connectivity dies?
Hmm.
And have you
Absolutely.
tested? Have you turned everything off, Wi-Fi's, and see, can you, quote unquote, survive?
Yeah, if we parallel other conversations we've had, this to me would be a perfect candidate for a technology card. Create
Yeah.
a technology card for offline mode. And what, if you're offline, what can you do? How do you access it? What can you access? And what
Or
can't you
what you
do?
will
So you,
not be okay
right,
not being able to access.
exactly. Where does that line get drawn? And then how do you make sure that that line is in a comfortable enough place that you can survive, for lack of a better term, for that
Right.
period of time without the connectivity? It's an interesting exercise, and it's an exercise best done when you don't need it. Don't wait till you've lost connectivity to do this test. That's a bad time to do it. Do it well before, because then you can start to look and mitigate things.
Mhm. Yeah, there is a lot to think into this, and actually, maybe in a couple of months or so to come back and see what were the results of this test, and if you are playing with this and want to share with us what was the results of your test, you know bring send the comments. You can
Mhm.
share with us and see what you discover, because I'm sure, as we are discussing, and what came to this topic was, that's what happened to you. You went to that place. Oh, I have no connectivity now. I'm having all these things that I use that I can't use. So it will be very interesting for our listeners, for you, for me, to come back maybe in a couple of months and share what we
Mhm.
discover out of this test, and what is the recovery plan for this. If my internet dies today, what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's having that plan, not even just for situations where it's crisis management, but effective use of that as an option. Can I effectively put an offline mode to use as a productive tool? And you had talked about that a little bit earlier, but it can be very empowering to be able to go through and shut off all the dings and bells, shut off the incoming fire hose of email, shut off Teams and things like that, and be able to concentrate on a singular activity for a period of time. Now, I know it's not reasonable for many people. They have to have those things, and that's, as always,
Fine.
your mileage will vary. But it can be an interesting experiment to see maybe this is an opportunity to weave into your platform.
Yeah. And understand that, I sit, now that the weather is getting nicer, you know, I brought some stuff to the patio and sit on the patio. But as I said, I have full connectivity there. Okay.
Hmm.
So it's not a valid test. Not only that, I'm 5 steps to the office. Oh, I should need this.
Yeah,
It's 5 steps. What if you can't? And that's
yeah,
where the exercise gets very powerful.
yep,
But
that it is.
follow us where you like to listen to podcasts, like us or subscribe to us and leave us a review. You can also interact with us in personalproductivity.club. We have a channel there for cross platform. We are Augusto Pinaud and Art Gelwicks. See you next time from your favorite device. Thank you.